Welcome to System Prompt. I'm Peter.
Val.
This podcast is really about what's actually happening in AI, not hype, not surface level. Takes more about talks more, real systems, trade-offs, and how things are actually being built. And today we're starting with a big one, right? AI versus software as a service. This is something that you're seeing a lot of contrasting opinions about, especially on social media. But what is actually happening? Everyone says AI is changing the way software as a service, but I think most of that conversation is pretty shallow, right? So what we want to do is break down what's actually changing under the hood, what that means if you're actually building something.
Cue the Undertaker music when they're saying AI is dead, and they
Yeah.
cut it off really quick because it's uh it's a lot of fluff in there, man. The Undertaker wouldn't approve.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, look, in the grand scheme of things, people code is cheap, maintenance is hard, right? It's just shifting where the brunt of the work is, and it's not even shifting because that's where the work is. I used to like to tell a lot of people, especially when I'm teaching them, and you know, they can spin up these MVPs in just a couple of paragraphs, but all of a sudden, that's like, wait a second, your job actually starts after it's created, not while you're creating it. But anyway, let's take a look at what software as a service used to be, right? Uh, Software as a service model that a lot of these companies are using, per seat pricing, centralized platform, sticky UX, plus workflows. The value actually came from the software itself, the features, UI, UX lock-in. Uh, the software was the product.
Yeah, I uh, I totally agree, and all companies had to run by it. This wasn't an option, and unfortunately, a lot of companies had in terms of trying to build and grow their business. This is what they needed in order to get the tools quickly they needed to operate at a reasonable cost. Reasonable.
Reasonable. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the brunt of the problem, right? Because software is no longer the moat. Uh, the these AI models can replicate these features fast. Feature parity is easier than ever, right? Pricing models are breaking. Per seat doesn't map cleanly anymore. It's a complete shift towards like usage, tokens, outcomes. Switching costs drop. AI can abstract workflows, less dependency on specific tools. No, but what does that mean, though? All right, well, you have a bunch of these people that are using these platforms that they've been paying for forever. Now, and these platforms love it because they just charge them more year over year. But these people are only using maybe about 15-20% of the products. That's all they need. And now all of a sudden, AI comes around and it's getting rid of their moat because they're like, wait a second, I only use this and this, and I can build that with AI. Now, there's some issues with that also, but the value is moving. Um,
Yeah, I look at it like the first yellow brick on the yellow brick road has been laid, but it doesn't mean that's something that everybody could traverse easily. You know, it's promising, and we'll see how it goes if construction goes well. But let's hold off the big move just yet. You know?
yeah, no, I get you, because you know, what becomes more valuable in this environment, right? Proprietary data becomes leverage. Absolutely. Workflows over features, orchestration is going to matter more than UI. Infrastructure layers are going to emerge. And this is where my lane is, right? You're talking like gateways, policy layers, routing, and observability. This is what I do because I like to put a magnifying glass on just about everything. I want to see how many tokens I'm using per request. I want to see what's going on under the hood. I want to have adequate logging. Can somebody who doesn't have an understanding about actually maintaining software long term, can they actually build these internal tools to last? Right? That's a big question. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you know, from the other side, I look at it like okay, can software be built that I don't have to have a user manual to learn how to use every single time? It's not going to be like me taking on another job where it's easy to use. You know, it's intuitive. It makes sense. Not to the person who's trying to solve their individual problem, but to people who are thinking about how this one solution could scale across an entire company.
And I get it, and it's looking like, and it's really, I'm seeing the post on LinkedIn, I'm seeing the post on Facebook, on X. I reduced the cost of my toolage per month, my tools per month by 90%. Uh, but you're not telling me you're spending $200 a month on Claude, so you're not reducing it to zero. You're not reducing it that much. The cost kind of switches a little bit, right? You're taking the cost of the platform, but if you're making your own CRM and you're spending 8 grand a month on Salesforce, okay, a $200 Claude subscription might actually benefit you a little bit. It's not gonna, you're reducing your cost significantly enough, but who's maintaining it, right? I think the position is ownership. Who's owning this, right? And what happens when it breaks? Because these companies don't pay software as a service to create a product. They pay them to service it, right? They pay them to fix it when it breaks, and they pay them so they don't have to fix it. They can pick up the call, they can pick up the phone and go, "This is broken and I need it fixed right now," right?
There's
Um,
also somebody like clearly to blame when something goes wrong, which we can't just overlook that. There's always got to be somebody to take the blame, and it's so much easier when you can point to an entity as opposed to a coworker.
Yeah, right. When it's oh my God, this service, we need to go find another service. But no, when it's John from accounting that's putting together the accounting software, it's like, oh well, shit,
Same guy you go to This is the same guy you go to happy hour with.
yeah.
You guys golf together every weekend. What do you do at the meeting?
And then yeah, absolutely, and if John from accounting is spinning up software, then what does that mean for does John get a pay raise for building this piece of software? Are they hiring internally to build this piece of software? Because if they're hiring internally to build a piece of software, then you're going to end up in a position where it's literally just transferring costs, right? Or you're paying for a third party service. Now, if you're spending 5 grand a month to have 5 grand a month, 3 grand a month, whatever the price is for a third party service to manage your product, it's not going to be cheap. These people aren't going to manage your product for free. Uh, Is it going to be a per seat license, right? You're gonna go full
Yeah.
circle. You're right back into software as a service.
And even then, like if you think about it, do you want your best product people working on internal products, or do you want your best product people working on the product that's keeping the lights on?
Yeah,
There's a lot of questions that have to be asked and answered, and then worked through. This is gonna be a lot of failure, and you know, let's see how this goes. But we brought up a lot of problems in like the first like 5 minutes, and none of these have clear answers.
no, and one of the biggest problems that I see is just having a foundational knowledge about architecture and code in general, right?
Ding ding ding, brother. Ding ding ding.
uh, Again, I'm not trying to. I don't want to. I don't want to make it seem like I'm anti people going out there and giving it a try to code, right? Leveraging AI coding, being able to spin up websites, internal applications for yourself. It's an amazing time to be in tech, or it's an amazing time to be alive, right? Let's not talk about the war in Iran. I don't want to make this political, but let's key in on tech. It's an amazing time for tech, right? Um, and I don't want to take away from that. I don't want to take away from that experience. But what's the difference between a software engineer and somebody who's using AI leverage coding, right? It's fundamental knowledge, yes, right? But not only that, it's reps, right? A software engineer has enough reps under their belt so when things start breaking, they know what direction they need to go to fix it. Um, and even when they're even you rewind from there, right? Rewind from there. What about building? right? One of the low-hanging fruit that I generally show people as an example of is authentication, right? How do you define your usernames? Or, most of the time, if you just let AI run with it, it's going to say username equals string. Username equals string is going to create a big gaping vulnerability in your product, right? And then people, what does it mean? How do you define a username? Well, you define a username by no special characters, one uppercase, no longer than X amount of characters, because then you're leaving yourself open for cross-site script. What is it? Cross-site scripting. You're leaving yourself open for a lot of vulnerabilities in this application that you don't want to do. And then even I wrote a LinkedIn post the other day about how I'm working on this PII scrubber for my gateway, and just something as simple as how do I know that my PII scrubber is working? Well, you add a logger, right? So you know what oh look, it worked, it flagged XYZ. But now your your PII scrubber is now logging PII, right? Personal identifiable information. If you're unaware of that is that's um, so you're not removing the risk, you're just moving it somewhere else. Now I have it cryptographically hashed, and it'll flag the specific item, but it'll be like, we found a phone number, we found an IP address, we found a social security number, and it scrubs it that way, as opposed to actually relying on the actual piece of PII, or storing that piece of PII to validate that specific lock. And it's important that people have an understanding that you have to build things intelligently, and you need domain expertise in order to do that.
Which is
Uh,
what SaaS companies do. One guy in your company is building it for their problem, but the people who are running the SaaS company, this is all they do. Every single day, they wake up and go to sleep and have hundreds of thousands of hours of meetings about how to solve a specific problem, where it's become a one-off for somebody in the company who probably has the capability of doing it. Let's say we give it to a software engineer turned product manager, and they have a really clear idea, but they don't have the reps. And reps do matter. And could they get the reps eventually? Of course they can. But then you start to introduce other problems. Well, where does this end? Are we building one feature on our own? Are we building our own entire platform? Because now you're talking about what you addressed earlier. What does the architecture look like? Because if you're building it as you're building your own custom platform that's going to service all of your features, that should be planned at the beginning, man. That shouldn't be something that you shoehorn in the middle and then try to add to your internal software. And then you got to go. There's still basic things that they're gonna have to worry about. Like, did we scrub all of the person who we let go last week's information from our system where they can't log in, or did somebody forget? And although we let them go, they still have full reign and full access to our system, not only for the ability to grab information, proprietary information, but this is the number one way to get hacked. What do you do?
yeah, yeah. It's it's an interesting time in this, like just being able to um, understand and see it from just a zoomed out perspective. Even if you're writing in JavaScript, right, or one of the most popular languages to write any website in. You don't have a correct architecture, you don't have correct routing. Well, now you've exposed all your code in your front end. It happens every day. So now not only are you vulnerable, but they can literally see your code, break your break your website because they know exactly how it's coded and where your vulnerabilities are. Um, it's interesting and wild times in terms of this. But is AI going to get good enough to fill that gap? Is really the question, right? Because right now it's no. Right now, today, it's no, because you can't tell AI to be a good programmer because that's just as vague, right? What is a good programmer? A good programmer will shape things differently. There's no real set definition, but they will follow a set of principles. They will follow a set of uh, architecture, architecture principles, coding principles, will it all be the same? No. Can they all be labeled as good programmers? Absolutely. Um, you actually have to specify what you want it to do. Um, and now the maker of Claude Code, 100% of the code, you got the CEO of NVIDIA at GTC talking about OpenClaw, a piece of open source software, is the most influential piece of software ever made. Like, that's wild. But
Yeah, and there's a lot of people listening to us right now, probably running SaaS companies that are that want to give us high fives, but before they go too crazy, um, unfortunately, this is not going to end well for SaaS companies, especially the ones that have been moving in molasses the last 10 years because they had a monopoly. They had their market locked down. They had those solid internal connections that's not going anywhere. They they were the places where innovation has gone to die. And the first sign of that was a lot of their top talent leaving to go to these other places where they can really go push the limits of their capabilities. Those guys are going to be in trouble because for the companies that plan this properly and find some sort of internal training system for the people that work within the company to make building part of the job description, which also means giving tokens and all these other little things that are required with building, just to be clear. So we're talking about different types of compensation packages now. Because if you're requiring somebody to build, and you're using the best models, you're also going to have to, work on something with the tokens. But that's another conversation. But eventually, for the companies that do it right and they look at this as a long-term strategy to say, hey, we're gonna decrease our bottom line by XYZ% over the next 5 years. The SaaS companies are going to be in trouble because they're going to get the reps. Are they still going to be able to replace all SaaS companies? No, I think the models are going to change. I think it's going to be a pound of feathers versus a pound of fat. It's still going to be a pound, but one is a lot easier to move than the other. You know, and a lot of these SaaS endpoints are going to be API endpoints. There's still going to be somebody that you need who's an expert at a particular area that's crafting this. But instead of you having to use their interface directly, you may just have to plug into it via an API and only pay for the stuff that you want. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to be shelling out a platform that somebody's only using maybe 15 to 30% of its products. I think pricing in general is going to have to change in order for software as a service to adapt and to survive this. Um, Again, because code is cheap. Architecture is expensive, but code is cheap, right? We've Large language models have almost officially commoditized code. Uh, and yeah, no, I mean, look, I see these guys on LinkedIn. Somebody already created a rival to Loom, and they did it on a podcast, and they just built a rival to Loom right on a podcast. Uh, they're they're attacking software as a service. What are we going to build today that's going to rival some other product in an afternoon? Um, it's look, there's some people that are so embedded in it with some of these pieces of software that it's going to make it very difficult for them to move off. But at the same coin, AI in general, large language models in general, actually simplify each of those processes. As hard as some of these companies make it to move off, like have you ever heard of people moving off of Salesforce? It's a nightmare. Like,
You talk about somebody who needs to be worried. I don't know how any of those guys are sleeping right now, man, because things look shaky at best for the
I
long term. For the
yeah.
long short term, they're good. Long term, but then how do you plan? What's your 10-year strategy? Like what's your 5-year strategy? What's your 3-year strategy? I mean, now in the AI era, you can't probably plan out 5 years anymore. Maybe 6 months is probably the most you can do, but that's a scary 6 months if the models get even better than where they are today, which is going to happen. What does that look like for the little guys who are like, you know what, I don't want to pay $10 anymore for Zoom? And to be clear, I'm one of those guys. One of the first apps I've ever built was because I didn't want to pay for Zoom anymore. Not that I didn't want to pay for Zoom. Zoom is great, but all the stuff that I wanted, it didn't do, and I didn't need all the other stuff that it did that I don't want. And I was like, hey, let me just do that. Now, do we use this thing externally for meetings? Not yet. We still gotta tighten things up. There's still some resources, going back to your point, where it's not ready for that. But internally, for our meetings, we could run a meeting for 10 hours, brother, and and record it and share screen and whatever we want, man. There's no limitations to what we could do within our meeting, but yet it's run on a platform that mirrors those kind of platforms. That means that for our internal teams, Zoom is never going to get our money again. They don't know it yet. But what happens when other people start to realize the same thing? You know, it's like a death by a thousand cuts.
Now, the one thing that I'd really love for, you know, that's created maybe a little bit deeper of a moat for itself is Slack, right? Now, I hate Slack, and, and people are going to kill me for that one, but everything is hidden behind a paywall. It's not that like I'd rather use Discord. Look, and people are like, "Oh, but your data," and I'm like, your data's going somewhere anyway, right? Unless you're hosting everything locally and you're spinning up your own messaging services and you're doing everything internally in your intranet or on your own servers, your data's going somewhere. Um, and look, I don't like Slack. I don't like, but what have they done? What have they done for themselves that really allow them to be very sticky in this environment? Cross company
Yeah, I was about to
collaborations,
say.
workstations, where these these workplaces where you can just invite somebody from another company right into a separate workspace, and now you have a collaboration area that you can just you can that's the stickiness, right? Because then it's not just replacing Slack for one person, it's replacing Slack across an entire ecosystem of companies that actually communicate with each other, and that's a lot harder to do, right? Because that requires some coordination. Um, and if you've ever worked with enterprise, uh, coordination could be tough and slow, and decision making is slow, and you hope for things to happen faster. But this is also why I believe software as a service probably short term, like you said, and I agree to that point that it's not going anywhere. Because it's going to take some of these companies so long to make a decision on what to do that they're just not going to make it, and it's going to be analysis paralysis. They're not going to have an understanding of what to do. Some of these smaller companies, though, these small to mid-sized companies, are in new territory, right? As long as they're not having like their nieces and nephews build their products for them, right?
Oh man, I mean, you're hitting so many points, which is strengthening the argument that it's not going anywhere. Because even as you say that, I'm like, the reason why, and I like Slack, so we're on the opposite sides of the coin here. But I only like Slack because I'm seeing iteration version number, I don't know what, 12,000 maybe, 15,000, 1,200. I don't know how many iterations did Slack go through before I started utilizing it. Are those internal teams going to use that same loop in a company that moves like molasses? What happens if somebody just doesn't want to give you feedback because they're too busy? What happens if people are saying, hey, I don't like these other tools, but I also don't like your tool. Like, I don't want to use it. And they can't give you feedback because they've never used it. They'd rather not because it's just not a good tool. There's still those things that you have to go through. And although the models will have the knowledge on what those need to do, the problem is that that fork in the road is not two options oftentimes when you need to make a decision. That fork in the road is like is has a lot of teeth to it. You know, it's not two directions. You could go in maybe 6 or 7 directions at any given checkpoint. Is the model always going to make the right choice? Is the product person always going to make the right choice? Well, both of those should be no. You know, they should be no. So then, what does the end product look like? because most product people know that we're just giving you good enough, but we know that the product is going to be where it is once we start to open up that feedback loop. And in a company that moves super slow just to get a decision made, well, first of all, I hate to say it, but I'll say it clear. Most of those companies are not going to be around in 5 to 10 years. Because if this is how they're operating right now, they don't realize that there's going to be guys entering the market there's some who are already here and some who are being inspired to enter the market that are going to be punching way above their weight class. Those are the guys you really need to worry about. And I think they're a little bit of a different conversation because they're probably starting as a team of engineers. And the reason they're able to punch above their weight class is because they probably have not fought the friction of AI and embraced it. And they're the guys that all are building 100% with AI, but they are using the proper protocol. They're the guys that are building all of their teams systems internally because they know how these systems work, and they're letting these things run on its own for days, and they're just checking back to see what the pro. Those are the guys that when they become a dominant force in the marketplace, there will be no room for the traditional SaaS company. But you know, it'll be a while.
Yeah, it's like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were telling me, they were getting some insights into Capital One, right? Which is pretty cool. They were explaining to me that basically, Capital One got is a leg up, and do we love to big up credit card companies? Not all the time, but in this specific instance, we're talking about a credit card company that builds all their tools internally, and that's how they've always done it. So now you have AI that's on the field able it's going to be interesting to see, or if it's ever publicly stated or publicly out there, with whether they're shrinking their engineering teams because of AI, or they're keeping the same size engineering teams, and only being able to move quicker with AI. Right? Those are probably going to be an interesting point to see. But one of the things that I find the most interesting, and when we keep talking about these really slow-moving companies and their adoption rates, you either have companies that are adopting AI or finding ways to adopt AI, and then you have other companies where their whole thought process around adopting AI is whether they're going to enable Gemini or Copilot for their staff. And they're just now being able to say, yes, we can enable Copilot for our staff, and we're in 2026. This has been around for years at this point, and companies are just now starting to adopt it. And then you have other like the BLS, the business labor statistics or whatever. Then they're basically saying that there's no productivity increase. There's only a 2.8% productivity increase from AI. And I'm sitting here going, what the hell are you measuring? Most of these companies don't even know how to use it.
Which, I mean, the part you're saying right now probably is the strongest point as to why SaaS isn't dead yet. It's because most of these companies are not even using AI. So how they're not even using AI. So how in the world could they go in and take that leap to go and start building they don't most of them don't know, nor should they know or care how the services they pay for actually work. Many of these, enterprise companies, they probably have between 150, 400 and 400 SaaS products that they're paying for at any given point in time across their team. You tell me that, like, how many people in that organization know fundamentally how those software pieces of software actually work? So when you're thinking about it, it's like not only do you need to replace one piece of software, all of it, all of the parts that you need, but then you need to go and replace many different services, and you don't even use AI at all now. It's not happening. But there is a breaking point, and that breaking point is going to come when they look at the balance sheet and they're saying, "Hey, how are our competitors running laps around us?" We've seen this story over and over again, man. We've seen companies that refuse to change and get crushed by market pressures. There's a lot of those companies, but they're skewing the numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, let's make this clear. everybody's using AI, right? Whether the but when we're talking about companies using AI, we're talking about companies that are rolling out AI policy, that are rolling out AI for their company, and they're not in the situations where these employees are just using shadow AI. They're just jumping on ChatGPT during the day to do a thing, or they're using Gemini to generate their images. We're talking about companies that are rolling out these tools for these different departments that and a lot of them just aren't doing it, right? I had a conversation with somebody who worked for another big bank, and they're like, "Well, we just started getting that. We just started it." And what do you mean you just started it? Like what? And sometimes it's wild because you'll see a company with 10 people, their entire workflow is leveraged with AI. They're they're bringing in income hand over foot because they've reduced their overhead and their margins are huge. And it's like, well, shit. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I guess even when we think about it, like how many people, how much, what is the AI talent pool looking like? I mean, like, do many of these companies even have access to people that they can talk to at the C-suite level to start making these decisions? Like, where is this information coming from? Are they talking to people who fundamentally understand AI and its potential impact, not only in the market in general, but their industry and their business specifically? And are they getting the right uh, consultation in terms of how to approach this, or are they getting this information from somebody who has another agenda? You know, like where are they getting this from? Because I don't know if there's that many people out there that they can actually talk to get real credible information, who has a really good understanding of this of where we are right now. Because if their only source is YouTube, if their only source are reading articles or running a deep research, there's too many gaps in there for that level. They would need somebody that they can really walk and talk through, because implementing AI into your system is almost like it's like you got to approach it like implementing a product into your system. What is this for? What are we doing? Where is this going to go? How is it helping us? When we talk about the productivity part, like how many of those pathways are really built out where you can measure how it should affect your business long before it was implemented. Something, there's a lot of questions, man, and there's not as many answers, but those questions make me scratch my head as to what's really happening in those boardrooms when these decisions are being made. The yays
yeah.
and the nays, like what's happening? I don't. It's not clear to me.
No, absolutely, and especially when you have, your IT people, your MSPs, they're all afraid to adopt. Uh, their idea of adoption is a business ChatGPT account or a business Claude account. Um, yeah, that's fine, right? The worry is data exfiltration. The worry is, um, but in the realm in the realm of software as a service, if you're a company and you're even having the thought about building your own internal tools, and you have your IT and your MSP staff going, we don't want to really take care of another piece of infrastructure for you guys, and that's how you need to treat it. Because now, if you already don't have engineering staff, you don't have a unit that develops within a company, well, you need to build that, right? Because a software developer is not necessarily a DevOps guy. A DevOps, the two are not the same thing. When you refer to whenever I see things like scaling, or and people are talking that in terms of software engineering, well, there's another type of scaling, and that's software engineering doesn't even touch that. Software engineers don't touch Kubernetes, Nomad, distributed services. They build them. They don't they build it once. They pass to the DevOps. The DevOps worry about scaling it to 100, 1,000, a million people. What you need set up for that varies. Whenever you know whenever I see people, I'm going to push back on a little bit of things that we don't necessarily need to worry about, right? In terms of people vibe coding their own piece of software. Whenever I see scale It annoys me because scale needs to be defined, right?
Totally.
If are you building something for your 3 person are you building an internal tool for 3 people in your department? Scale is not going, it's going to be negligible. You're not going to have to worry about what scale is. Even if it's 10 people, you're not going to necessarily have to worry about the scale. Are you building it for 100 people? Maybe at that point, depending on how heavy the piece of software is, maybe at that point you start worrying about scale. 1,000, okay. You want it to be front facing with millions of people on it, then absolutely you need to worry about scale. They're absolutely correct on every set, but there's levels to this. When you just say scale without defining what it is, it's meaningless, and it just looks like insecurity.
Yeah. I mean, and I even just I circle back to it again and I say, okay, well, a company's building internal software for 1,500 people with a high probability of concurrency because everybody's working 9 to 5 and they're probably on the East Coast. And you have to plan for that. So whoever's the person building that feature has to plan for that and test for it. But then, like, where's the data gonna go? Well, you're probably gonna get a service like AWS or Azure or GCP, and you're gonna pay monthly for the service to run the software. Like the software still has to live somewhere. It still has to, there's still certain protocol you're gonna have to have. Now, are you gonna host that internally? Probably some people are. You're definitely gonna need some experts outside of AI to go and build and maintain those servers. And if you're getting servers at this point in time in an AI tech stack, and you're not getting GPUs, what are you doing? So it's like all these complexities, because you're talking DevOps. Okay, you built the software. Like, where does it go? Because the DevOps starts when you need to put that code somewhere. When that code needs to live outside of your IDE. Okay, now the DevOps starts. Am I setting up the infrastructure properly? And along the way, you're gonna be paying companies monthly to do whatever you don't want to do. And now you're locked into them because your company loves the software that this person built. Okay, you guys did it. But you need AWS, you need these companies in order to make sure that the software runs all the time. And that's for what we know. There's tons of other services that you're going to need to start plugging in when you start to really think about the DevOps pipeline to make sure that it's being monitored properly. Are you building your own internal monitoring software? Maybe. Some people probably have some, but you're most likely going to get some of the guys that have been doing it really, really well for a long time, and you're going to pay them monthly. Or per token or per request, which is probably going to be where everything moves towards, where the end goal of the SaaS model is you're paying API costs and you're paying per request.
Yeah, we haven't even brought up if the people are under any sort of compliance, or you're storing PII, right? Because then you need to you're so if you're building a local tool, your local tool needs to be behind a firewall. It needs to follow XYZ protocols in order for it to actually be able to do that. Um, or you're gonna get sued when your data gets leaked, right? These are so it's not always as cut and dry as code is cheap, right? Code is cheap. Architecture, system design is still the forefront of what people actually need.
And maintenance.
And maintenance, yeah, absolutely. Ownership over the product long term, ownership over the tools long term. I mean, how many situations did you have these companies that are running these internal tools or internal programs, and it all runs on tribal knowledge? Nobody, and you can't fire Tom. Tom's 84-year-old software engineer. If he leaves,
Oh
that's
man. Yeah, well, what
it.
happens if the person who's the architect of this really cool piece of software, somebody else in leadership comes on board and fires them?
Yeah.
And everybody says, no, 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 no. And then you fire them, and there's nobody else to carry the mantle for that program that they built. Because this is what happens in security, where the IT and all the security team is saying, "Hey guys, I don't think this is a great idea," and everybody's like, "Oh no, 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 it's too expensive, or it's too this, or it's too that, or hey, this person you probably shouldn't let go until there's a proper transfer of knowledge, because what they built is the backbone of this company, and for $10,000, if you're gonna let them go, that's gonna be a $10 million problem." Well, if all these people are building these things within the company and there's not a proper transfer of knowledge, which is standard protocol for software engineers, that's when does that happen? Does that happen on company time? Is it every hour, 2 hours a week we're setting aside for proper knowledge transfer? Is that are those hours going into maintaining that system and not putting that towards creating a better product for your customers? There's a lot of decisions and a lot of trade-offs that need to happen. The thing is, with a four-person company of software engineers who build with AI, this is a wrap. This is we're all having this at dinner, and the decisions are being made, and we're moving forward with it. But for a large enterprise, I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I don't believe it's going to happen quick enough for the average SaaS company who has found product market fit to not be able to pivot away from if they see the science coming. For some of these smaller guys, yeah, they're toast, man. They're going to be toast. The only reason they're toast is because they haven't been innovating. They're going to be toast because it's their own doing. But for the guys that are in their groove, that are doing their thing, they have some runway to figure out how they're going to restructure their business at the fundament, probably at the code level. They're probably going to have to rebuild their entire platform, which sounds like whoever's hearing this, who would have to be in charge of that, they're hard to skip the beat. But yeah, man, this is what's going to happen because that's going to be a lot more palatable than going under and losing everything. This is just the way it is.
So I think it's pretty clear that there's not a real clear, definitive direction in which software as a service is going to be going right now. And I think while you can definitely vibe code an MVP, you can definitely vibe code some internal tools where there's a small amount of people that are going to be using them. Um, but I think in terms of scale and in terms of look, I said scale and I didn't define it, but I'm the asshole now. But anyway,
Oh, Peter. Oh.
yeah, I know. Um, but you have to make sure that the experience level is there, right? Because you're gonna experience. Look, if you're a new software engineer and you're leveraging AI to build things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I want to make sure that I implore that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Hone your craft, fail fast, learn even faster, because that's how everybody learned, right? And if anybody tells you any differently, they're lying to you. But when you're spinning up operation critical applications, are those the best people to be building
You said it best, dude. Reps matter.
them? Yeah.
Reps matter, brother.
Um, and I wanted to thank everybody for our first show. Look, we stumbled. We're gonna fall. We're not gonna be as entertaining as we all like. Sometimes I like to be a very colorful guy most of the time, and most people find me funny, or maybe they're just laughing at me and I don't really know it. But uh, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you, guys. Peace.